Picture this, right? It's 2 a.m. in Taiwan. You're on this dark road, and you're just completely surrounded by this massive, moving crowd.
No, yeah, you can practically feel the exhaustion in the audio.
You really can. Like, if you listen closely to the source we're doing a deep dive on today, you hear the sheer physical toll.
Oh.
Just the rapid, heavy thud of footsteps on the pavement.
It's breathing. It's so intense.
Yes, exactly. You hear these young, fit people audibly fighting for air. Their breathing is, ragged and shallow, but then cutting right through all of that exhaustion. You hear this one woman casually chatting.
Just totally unfazed.
Totally unfazed.
Yeah.
Her voice is steady, her breathing is perfectly controlled, and she is just leaving these gasping young people completely in the dust. And the person setting this blistering pace, she is an 83-year-old woman.
It is honestly a remarkable piece of audio. I mean, what we're listening to is a live, boots-on-the-ground street interview, and it's recorded right in the middle of the Baishatun Mazu Pilgrimage. The source is actually episode 68 of a Taiwanese podcast called John Chat. And, because it's recorded right there on the march, it completely lacks any of that sterile studio polish.
Oh, the linguistic texture alone is just wild. It puts you right there on the street. It's this incredibly raw, energetic mix of Mandarin and Taiwanese.
Yeah, it's chaotic but so vibrant.
Exactly. And it captures the grueling nature of this event perfectly. So, for our mission today, we are going to unpack this specific John Chat episode. Because the woman at the center of it, she's known as Ruan Ma, or Mother Ruan. She basically shatters the way we think about physical decline.
Completely shatters it.
Right. We're going to explore how her I would say borderline extreme daily routine is really the ultimate wake-up call for anyone interested in what true effective anti-aging actually looks like.
Yeah, to fully appreciate what Ruan Ma is pulling off in this audio, we kind of have to ground ourselves in the reality of the Baishatun Mazu Pilgrimage itself.
It's not a walk in the park.
Definitely not. The source material makes it abundantly clear that this is not some casual, scenic hike. It is a punishing, multi-day test of extreme physical endurance.
Right. I mean, the source notes they walk for days on end. And they aren't just walking during the day, right? They are marching straight through the night without sleep.
Exactly.
At one point in the episode, they talk about starting a leg of the trek at like 2 or 2:30 in the morning at a location called Kingshui, just relentlessly pushing forward into the dark.
Yeah, and it's the kind of event that routinely breaks down perfectly healthy people in their 20s and 30s.
Boy, I bet.
People often join for just a single day, realize they have vastly underestimated the physical demand, and then they just go home completely depleted. I mean, only a fraction of the participants have the conditioning to endure the continuous sleep-deprived stress of the entire route.
And right in the middle of this crucible is Ruan Ma. I mean, she was born in the 33rd year of the Republic, which makes her 83 years old at the time of this recording.
83. It's just wild.
And she isn't some novice who decided to show up on a whim to see how far she could get. The source highlights that she has been walking this specific pilgrimage for 29 years.
Which means, if you do the math, she began this annual march in her mid-50s.
Right.
That alone defies standard expectations, right? Because that's the exact decade when, a lot of people begin to actively scale back their physical exertion.
They start anticipating that natural decline.
Exactly. But her participation isn't even the most staggering detail the source gives us. We really need to look at what she did during her 24th year on the pilgrimage.
Oh, man. This detail completely reframed my understanding of human capacity. So during her 24th year, meaning she's in her late 70s at this point, she didn't just walk the route.
No, she didn't.
She insisted on carrying the traditional 36-guard weapons.
Right, and to understand the physical load here, the source details these as heavy ceremonial instruments. We're talking about traditional spears, halberds, heavy sun, and noon signs.
These aren't props.
No, they are substantial pieces of wood and metal. And the source specifically points out that the front 6 of these instruments are remarkably heavy. They require serious upper body strength and core stability just to hold upright.
Let alone carry for miles.
Exactly.
We're talking about an elderly woman carrying heavy ceremonial weaponry. The source actually mentions that a team leader tried to intervene. Right?
Yeah. They looked at a woman in her late 70s, assessed the weight of those front 6 weapons, and basically said, you're too old to be taking on this kind of burden.
But she just dismissed the concern entirely. She proved her stamina was far beyond what anyone expected.
She essentially bypassed the role of a standard participant and actively took on the role of a burden carrier.
If we put that into a modern context, carrying those specific heavy weapons for miles in your late 70s. It's kind of like a modern endurance athlete showing up to a marathon and deciding to run it wearing a 20-pound weighted vest.
Right, just because they can.
Yeah, just for the challenge. So it really begs the question, how does an 83-year-old body bypass those biological and societal expectations of physical fragility so completely?
Well, the answer the source provides forces us to look past the pilgrimage itself. We have to examine the hidden architecture of her life.
The day-to-day stuff.
Exactly. Her performance on that dark road in Qingshui, it's not the result of fortunate genetics or some miraculously preserved body. It is the output of a rigorously structured, highly demanding daily discipline.
And the metrics of her daily lifestyle are, frankly, genuinely difficult to comprehend. First, the source notes she consumes only 2 meals a day.
Just 2.
Pair that with the fact that she functions on just 5 hours of sleep a night.
Which, from a purely physiological standpoint, that is a remarkably lean recovery window. I mean, most medical guidelines emphasize 7 to 8 hours of sleep for cellular repair.
Especially as we age, right?
Right. But her recovery window is narrow because her active window is dominated by an astonishing training schedule. The audio explicitly states she trains for 5 hours every single day.
Wait. Let's really emphasize that number. 5 hours of deliberate physical exercise daily.
It's incredible. The breakdown provided in the source is 2 hours of training in the morning, followed by another 3 hours in the afternoon or evening.
Wow.
And she casually mentions that sometimes she bypasses that split entirely. She'll push past 4 hours straight without a single break, walking all the way to a place called Majizwan.
I have to admit, when I first read that, I tried to imagine the mechanics of an 83-year-old walking for 5 hours.
Yeah.
I pictured, a very slow, shuffling pace.
A leisurely stroll.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the source completely shatters that assumption. It gives us a very specific, non-negotiable metric. She maintains a strict walking speed of 6 kilometers per hour.
That is fast.
For anyone trying to visualize that, if you get on a treadmill and set it to 6 kilometers per hour, you are not strolling. You are at the absolute upper limit of a walk.
Yeah, for most adults, you almost have to transition into a light jog just to keep up with that.
Right. It requires aggressive hip drive, sustained arm swing, and significant cardiovascular output.
And she anchors this speed to strict daily goals. She guarantees to herself that she will finish 12 kilometers in exactly 2 hours.
Which means there is zero room for slowing down to look at the scenery.
Oh, none.
But, pushing a body that hard, that consistently in its 8th decade.
Yeah.
It naturally raises a red flag for me regarding safety.
Oh, for sure.
We are constantly told that older joints are fragile, that cartilage wears away, and that high impact or sustained repetitive stress is a fast track to knee replacements and immobility. Doesn't a regimen this militant risk destroying her joints?
Well, that is the standard medical assumption we all operate under, right?
Okay.
We tend to view the human body like a car engine.
The more miles you put on it, the more the parts wear down.
Exactly. But the source material addresses this concern head-on, and it reveals a biological mechanism that is much more dynamic. Because Ruan Ma wasn't always this indestructible force, she actually hit the exact physical wall you are describing.
Oh, wait, really? The audio reveals she had severe issues with her cartilage and knee bones?
Yes. It stemmed from years of repetitive stress from kneeling and praying. Her joints were failing. She was experiencing the exact structural breakdown that convinces most people to, permanently hang up their walking shoes.
And the conventional response to deteriorating cartilage is profound rest. You minimize load, you avoid stairs, you basically try to preserve whatever cushion is left in the joint.
Right, you treat it like glass.
But she took the polar opposite approach. The source states she used ballroom dancing and relentless walking to actively rebuild her strength.
And this is where we need to look at the biology behind her recovery. Our joints do not operate like lifeless mechanical hinges. They adapt to the demands placed upon them.
Okay, how so?
Well, cartilage specifically doesn't have a direct blood supply. It actually relies on movement to absorb nutrients.
Oh, I see. Think of the joint like a dense, wet sponge, right? If you just set a sponge on the counter and never touch it, it dries out.
Exactly. It becomes stiff and eventually turns brittle. It loses its structural integrity.
That is exactly what happens to human joints during prolonged sedentary rest.
Precisely.
But when you actively load the joint, when you subject it to the rhythmic, complex movements of ballroom dancing, or the sustained, repetitive impact of walking 12 kilometers, you're repeatedly squeezing that sponge.
You're forcing the body to flush out cellular waste and pull fresh, nutrient-rich synovial fluid back into the joint.
Wow, so you're basically signaling to the body that the muscles, ligaments, and tendons surrounding that knee absolutely must be reinforced to handle the daily stress.
Exactly. She didn't rest her joints to save them. She subjected them to a higher, different quality of physical stress to force them to adapt and strengthen.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, and by engaging in ballroom dancing, she introduced multi-directional movement. That challenges balance and strengthens the stabilizing muscles around the knee that simple linear walking just doesn't target.
And what's the result of forcing that biological adaptation?
Well, at 83, she proudly tells the interviewers that her joints don't lock up at all. She moves fluidly and without pain.
It is a profound shift in how we view recovery. And honestly, her mindset seems to be the engine driving that recovery. The source gives us some background on who she is outside of the pilgrimage, right?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting background.
She is a former middle school English teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and a community educator.
Yeah.
She actually describes her own personality in the interview as introverted but highly active.
Which tells us that her drive isn't about performing for an audience. It's a deeply internal, intrinsic motivation.
Right.
She articulates her core philosophy very clearly in the audio. She says, if you have confidence, you can achieve anything. Don't just think about it. You have to do it.
Don't just think about it. You have to do it. I mean, that is a sentiment we've all heard a million times in motivational speeches.
Oh, definitely. A total cliche.
Yeah. But when it is spoken by a woman who rebuilt her own failing knees so she could carry ceremonial weapons and walk 12 kilometers a day at a borderline sprinting pace, the phrase suddenly carries an incredible amount of weight.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the crucial distinction the source highlights is the intentionality behind her actions.
Intentionality.
Right. She isn't just staying active in some vague, unstructured way. She is executing a rigorous training program. Moving from the concept of leisurely exercise to deliberate training is the fundamental shift required to actually alter the trajectory of aging.
She sets a target, 12 kilometers in 2 hours, and demands that her physiology rise to meet it.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to that incredible audio scene from the John Chat episode and the profound realization it triggered for the people interviewing her. Listening to the tape, the contrast between the interviewer and the interviewee is almost comical.
Oh, it really is.
You have the ambient noise of the street, the rapid footsteps, and then you hear the young podcasters, these presumably healthy, capable people audibly fighting for breath.
Well, Ruan Ma is maintaining a sub-15-minute per kilometer pace. She is chatting comfortably, completely unbothered. And the young interviewers walking right beside her are actively struggling to sustain the conversation without gasping.
It is an incredible moment of vulnerability and honesty on the recording. The young interviewers don't try to hide their exhaustion.
No, they own it.
Yeah, they explicitly state that Ruan Ma's elite physical conditioning should serve as a wake-up call. They use her stamina to self-reflect and self-critique their own lack of physical training.
They recognize that they're being outperformed not because of some genetic lottery, but because they simply haven't done the work she has done.
Right.
And this self-reflection points directly to a broader, highly relevant concept discussed in the source analysis, LOHAS.
LOHAS. That stands for Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in the Mandarin analysis, this is connected to the concept of Liling, which translates to active aging.
Liling. I like that. You know, LOHAS is a term we usually associate with environmentalism, like buying organic food, recycling, reducing our carbon footprint.
Sure.
But applying the concept of sustainability to the human body completely changes the conversation. I mean, how do you make your own flesh and bones sustainable?
Well, you make it sustainable by preventing the degradation of its structural integrity. And the ultimate takeaway from the young interviewer's realization is that true active aging, true Lilim, is not a passive state you just hope to slide into.
You don't just wake up actively aging.
No, it requires acknowledging how deeply we neglect our physical bodies and then applying structured, measurable discipline to fix it.
It's like, you know when you leave your smartphone plugged in at 100% all day? Eventually, the battery capacity degrades. If you don't drain it and recharge it, it loses its ability to hold a charge. Society basically encourages us to stay plugged in at 100%.
We sit in ergonomic chairs at our desks for 8 hours. We sit in our cars during the commute. We sit on the couch in the evening.
Right. We are passively training our bodies to prepare for a life of absolutely zero physical demand.
We're sending a continuous biological signal that bone density, cardiovascular capacity, and muscular strength are simply no longer required for survival.
And the body is ruthlessly efficient. If you don't demand capacity, the body will stop maintaining it.
Exactly. But Ruan Ma is sending the exact opposite biological signal. By demanding a high output, 5 hours a day, 6 kilometers an hour, she is screaming at her cellular structure that it needs to be ready to march.
Yeah. She doesn't possess that stamina in spite of her age. Her body maintains that capacity because she puts in 5 hours of unrelenting work every single day to demand it.
The stark contrast captured on the audio between her steady voice and the younger interviewers panting beside her is the definitive proof. Age is far less of a determining factor than daily, measurable discipline.
The podcasters are young, but they haven't put in the hours of structural reinforcement, so their bodies lack the capacity to perform on that road.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive into episode 68 of John Chat has taken us on quite a conceptual journey today. We started by immersing ourselves in the chaotic, bilingual streets of Taiwan, really listening to the grueling reality of the Baishatun Mazu Pilgrimage.
An event demanding days of walking and pushing through the night.
Right. And we examined the sheer physical dominance of Ruan Ma, this 83-year-old former English teacher who completely redefines endurance.
From carrying the heaviest traditional guard weapons in her late 70s to maintaining a militant daily regimen of 5 hours of sleep, 2 meals, and 5 hours of strict training at 6 kilometers an hour.
And we explored the biological mechanics of how she overcame her own failing knees. She rejected the conventional wisdom of passive rest, choosing instead to actively rebuild her cartilage and joint strength through ballroom dancing and relentless walking.
Which ultimately forced those gasping young podcasters, and by extension all of us, to confront a difficult truth. True lohas, true active aging, is not granted to us by time. It is earned through intentionality.
It really is. The physical state you are experiencing right now is simply the accumulated result of what you have asked your body to do over the last 10 years.
That's a powerful way to put it. The core message embedded in that street interview is brutally simple. If you do not train, your body will decay.
Yeah, we spend so much time looking at the aging process through a lens of inevitability. We look at joint pain, shortness of breath, and fatigue as standard, unavoidable milestones on a one-way street of physical decline.
We accept the diagnosis of aging before the symptoms even appear. We assume the sponge will inevitably dry out, completely ignoring our own power to keep it vital.
But if an 83-year-old woman can completely rewire her body's physical expectations, if she can actively heal her failing joints through movement, build an engine that effortlessly crushes 12 kilometers in 2 hours, and casually outwalk people 50 years younger than her through sheer willpower,
it demands some deep self-reflection.
It really does. It leaves us with this question. What arbitrary limits have you accepted as permanent in your own life, simply because society told you that you were too old, too injured, or too busy to train for them? Next time you find yourself debating whether to skip a workout or take the elevator instead of the stairs, pull up the mental audio of Ruan Ma out there on that dark pavement, chatting comfortably, leaving everyone else in the dust. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.